Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Chun, and I practice sports medicine at Washington Permanente Medical Group in Seattle, Washington. I'm also the medical director of experience strategy for WPMG. I have no actual or potential conflict of interest in relation to this presentation. Here is the takeaway message for this talk. Data do not determine whether humanity is respected or stripped away. Users do. And so it is at the user level that we can restore humanity to medicine. Many health systems are placing more and more emphasis on big data related to physician performance. Operational policies are being put into place with metrics as the priority rather than human beings. But data are not the problem. It is how data are used that determines whether the value of a clinician to their patient, organization, or community has been stripped down to a number, mean score, or rank. The question for us then is, what does good data stewardship look like? And how can we ensure organizational accountability to good stewardship? The reality is that regulatory and financial considerations have motivated many health systems to create policies that tie physician performance on various patient experience or quality metrics to compensation incentives or career valuations. While organizations are intending this to engage transformational work, many such data strategies ultimately prove to be demoralizing to physicians and severely detract from professional well-being and practice fulfillment. Why is that? Well, frankly, it is dehumanizing and disrespectful for clinicians to be distilled into a simple metric, number, or statistic. But on top of that, many of the metrics physicians are being judged by are misleading in the first place. And that just adds to the frustration. A couple of years ago, a good friend of mine, Jonathan Revester, who has a wealth of managerial and leadership experience in the world of high-end retail, introduced me to the concept of vanity metrics. What are vanity metrics? Well, they are hollow metrics that can be flashy on an Excel spreadsheet or pass muster as something to point to during an administrative meeting, but in truth, hold little substance. On the surface, they can make you look good or bad to others, but they don't actually bear the correct correlation with actionable information that really matters. In other words, they don't actually help you understand your own performance in a way that can inform meaningful improvement strategies. While this concept is certainly more visible in the world of tech, e-commerce, and social media, it is striking how readily applicable it is to many measures of physician performance that are currently in use. What is the big deal? After all, shouldn't organizations be measuring for results in order to improve their outcomes? Yes, but organizations first need to fine-tune their methodologies and establish measures that can actually lead to their desired results. The big problem is that any metric can be a vanity metric if someone doesn't understand the data properly and isn't using the data correctly. Doing that steers organizations off course, and organizations end up focusing on goals that are not ideal and are not value added. Instead of data moving the needle for learning, growth, and improvement, vanity metrics become detrimental to the workforce and create a culture of dehumanization, disengagement, and demoralization. That's hardly the recipe for success. Let's see some examples of vanity metrics. I spend a lot of time in the world of patient experience measures, so here's a common scenario I run into. Posted comparative scores and ranks in the name of transparency. Now, I'm not opposed to transparency for the right strategic reasons, but if we look closely at the data presented here, we find that they are unfortunately vanity metrics. Here's an example. The allergy group is posting a monthly top box score of 84.2%, which exceeds the organizational score goal of 78.2. That's great. But unfortunately, it's also completely invalid. The problem here is the n size. It's less than 30, which is too small per the rules governing inferential statistics in the social sciences. So unfortunately, no meaningful conclusions about real performance can be drawn from this monthly data snapshot, period. How about the other group posted on the same board? Dermatology seems to have a minimum N here of 44 for the month, and the data is showing a month-over-month decline in performance since July. Is that cause for alarm? Behavior change? Maybe a warning? Certainly that happens, but should it? No, not based on this data. Let me explain a little more why. The problem with this vanity metric is that it fails to account for the significant difference in margin of error between a top box and a mean score. The top box percentage is the measurement of the proportion of respondents who gave only the top rating in the survey scale. For any given sample size, the top box is less precise and yields a much greater margin of error. The difference is substantially greater the smaller the sample size. So for our example here, with a sample size of 44, the top box margin of error is more than 14. So the actual top box score could be anywhere between 53 and 87. With this data, there is no way to know if a change occurred as a result of the behaviors of the people being measured or from routine statistical variation. The problem is, the physicians are being judged by these metrics. They're being made to feel bad about their recent performance when the data are so imprecise they can't tell you what their true performance was or inform a meaningful improvement strategy. How many times has a physician been stressed or dehumanized by vanity metrics such as these? How many times has a physician felt bullied when such statistics were included in their performance review or resulted in a negative effect on their compensation or career? Is this happening right now in your own organizations? Let's look at another quick example of vanity metrics within the domain of quality. This is a comparison of clinician performance in closure of preventive care gaps at a certain clinic. During the administrative quality meeting, the two green highlighted clinicians were called out as standard bearers for their excellent performance. The other clinicians were advised to learn from these clinicians, from their best practices, because the other clinicians needed to get their numbers up. The problem with that improvement plan was that it was based on vanity metrics that lacked context. In reality, the highest performing clinicians cited were the pediatricians. The other clinicians practiced adult medicine. Thus, the preventive care gaps of their respective patients were inherently different. This also brings up another important aspect of vanity metrics. If a measure is of something outside of the control of the individual being measured, it's a vanity metric. For example, the adult medicine physicians here can indirectly support or advocate for colon cancer screening or mammography, but they don't exert direct control over whether patients return their stool cards or schedule their mammograms as instructed. Because this metric does not dig into the nuances of the physician's specific roles and responsibilities, it does not provide an accurate accounting of what the physician is actually doing or how they can practically improve. If the physician can't improve the process, then they can't improve that metric, and following that vanity metric isn't going to do anything to help. Look around and you'll start seeing many examples of vanity metrics. Like I said earlier, any metric can be a vanity metric if the data are used improperly. So it is critically important that physicians and leaders be able to distinguish between real metrics and vanity metrics. Let's go through what you can do. First, understand that metrics and data are simply tools. If we use a tool correctly, things go well. If we use a tool incorrectly, things don't go so well. Here's an analogy. Imagine you purchased a new hammer from your local hardware store. It's a top-of-the-line hammer, and you go home and start hammering nails with it. The hammer works well, and you have a great outcome. But what happens if you go home and start trying to saw some wood with it? Things don't go so well. It's not the hammer's fault, it's still a great hammer, but you, the user, are likely causing more problems than you are fixing because you haven't understood how to use your tool properly and executed on that. So when you are getting ready to use data, make sure you know how to hammer the nail and not your finger. Second, appreciate that there is often a lot of cascading by administration, but often not a lot of time spent on quality control of the information cascaded. Many well-intentioned and well-meaning people propagate vanity metrics because they themselves are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information coming at them that they are required to act on. And they just don't feel they have the time to do otherwise. That's where you can come in. Ask the right questions about the data. Take the time to manage the data quality. If your organization is using a third-party company or even internal analysts, tap into those resources and let the experts help guide your way. They're often more than happy to help you attend to the quality of your metrics. The message here is, if you want to affect change and put the humanity back into metrics, you've got to do your own homework. Don't expect others to have done it for you. Third, in my experience, being argumentative has rarely resulted in meaningful policy change. If you're going to create meaningful change in the institutional policies that affect professional well-being and humanity, then you'll need to go beyond pointing out flaws in the logic and stopping there. Be prepared to present a better option, one that mitigates data issues and also strategically moves the organization forward towards its stated goals, while still safeguarding the humanity of the physicians. It doesn't necessarily have to be your idea. Listen to the experts. Leverage best practices from other institutions and organizations. Make sure you're prepared for possible pushback and stalling. And instead of being an arguer, be a resource and source of support for your organization and its leadership. Empower and enable leaders to interpret data effectively, understand trends appropriately, and then act on the information with humanity. Ultimately, you share the same mission to make your organization better, to provide for better health outcomes, and to support the well-being of your patients and the workforce that cares for them. At Washington Permanente Medical Group, we started from a place of demoralization and dehumanization because of our own vanity metrics. Our improvement strategy in the realm of experience was based on data transparency, but we lacked attention to the quality of the metrics we were being transparent about. However, with support from our executive leaders, we committed to evolving our data strategy to be mindful to the pitfalls of vanity metrics and to pivot to an improvement approach that mutually benefits both our performance and our culture. We worked with our data partners to truly understand our data, their limitations, our misunderstandings, and our missed opportunities to mitigate the negative impacts of data misuse to our workforce. In experience, we have uncoupled financial and career advancement incentives from performance-based metrics. Instead, we are leaning into an improvement strategy based on individual reflection to foster learning and growth. Physician accountability is focused on the emulation of our Kaiser Permanente experience standards and our level of engagement with continuous self-improvement work. This is a cross-cutting strategy of empowerment leadership with a growth mindset. We're not doing these things because they were our ideas. We're doing them because they are evidence-based recommendations of experts, and we're seeking to systematize those best practices. Will we be successful in returning humanity and professional well-being? I certainly hope so. We have a long way to go, and change management is hard. But at its start, it has made those affected breathe a little easier, feel less demoralized, and feel more hopeful and supported in their own learning and growth. For me, it's a good step in the right direction. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate the opportunity to present at ICPH this year and look forward to future collaborations.